In the beginning, there was nothing. No Netflix, no coffee, no existential dread. And then God made two people, dropped them in a garden, said don't touch that tree, and immediately walked off. Off stage. Classic. What followed was history's first relationship disaster, documented in diary form by both parties, who, it must be said, had extremely different takes on what was happening. This is Mark Twain's Diaries of Adam and Eve, a book that answers the eternal question, were men always this oblivious? And big yes. Yes, they were. Adam's diary begins with what can only be described as the energy of a man who did not ask for a roommate. This new creature with the long hair is in my way. It follows me everywhere. He doesn't even call her by name. He calls her the new creature. For weeks. Because apparently naming things is her job, and Adam has decided his contribution to civilization will be complaining about it. Eve, meanwhile, is out there naming everything. The waterfall, she calls it Niagara Falls because it looks like Niagara Falls. Adam's response to this? Dramatic. He is offended. He had a name for this place, a beautiful name, a poetic name. He was going to call it the Garden of Eden. Eve called it Niagara Falls Park and put up a sign that said, "Keep off the grass." Adam writes, and she touched the air, feeling the texture of the wind, then looked down at her own palms. She flexed her fingers, watching the movement with intense focus. This was a heartbeat. She took a single deliberate step forward, her eyes locked on the stars, and for the first time, the garden held its breath. The harmony of the garden began to pull apart. Adam retreated to the base of a marble column, his movements deliberate and heavy. He pulled a sharp stone from the ground and began to etch lines into a flat tablet. He did not look up. Adam writes, and I quote in spirit, "My life has no joy anymore. Sir, you are in paradise. There are no taxes, no traffic, no in-laws. And you are writing the ancient world's first passive-aggressive diary entry because a woman named a waterfall. Men." Now, in fairness to Adam, and I say this with great reluctance, the man is dealing with a lot. Eve is, by every account, an absolute force of nature. She talks, constantly. She names things instantly, one glance at an animal, and boom, it has a name. Adam admits, grudgingly, that she has a gift for this. He does not have this gift. He once stared at a dodo for an uncomfortable amount of time. She evangelizes wolves. She chases stars with a stick. She tries to collect stars in a basket by walking toward the horizon. She discovers fire accidentally by drilling a hole in a dry branch, and her immediate reaction is not panic. It is breathless delight. She names it. She names the smoke. She names the embers. She names the ash. She then invents two proverbs on the spot, congratulates herself, and goes to bed. Adam's reaction to the discovery of fire is to ask what it's good for. Millennia of scientific progress. Everyone, huh? Then, something appears in the camp. Small, loud, screaming. Adam does not know what it is. He thinks it's a fish. He puts it in the water to test this theory. It sinks. This is not conclusive enough for Adam. He then thinks it might be a kangaroo because it doesn't walk properly and its head fur is the wrong color. He officially names the creature Cangurum adamiensis. He builds traps in the forest to find a second one. He baits the traps with milk. For months, Adam is out there, scientific notebook in hand, classifying his own as an unknown zoological specimen. He considers, and I want to be very clear about this, he genuinely considers stuffing it for the museum. Eve says no. Eve says no, Adam. But then 10 years pass, and Adam's diary changes. He writes that he has come to understand how wrong he was about Eve, that without her, even paradise would be nothing, that he used to think she talked too much, and now he lives in terror that she might one day go quiet and leave his life. He thanks, and I want you to feel the full absurdity of this, he thanks the pun, the very first bad joke in history which he made about a waterfall for ultimately bringing them together. Mark Twain, you absolute genius. Eve's diary is a completely different document, where Adam is a man being, dragged reluctantly through life. Eve is a woman sprinting toward it with both arms open. On day 1, she wonders if there was a day 0, makes a note to track it, decides she is probably the most important specimen in an ongoing cosmic experiment, and begins documenting her findings for future historians. She is 1 day old. She is already thinking about her legacy. Eve looks at the world and sees only beauty. The stars, the moon, the colors of the sky at dusk. She is overwhelmed by all of it. She tries to knock stars out of the sky with a stick. She fails. She cries a little. She walks to the horizon to collect them in a basket. The horizon moves. She walks further. Her feet blister. She comes back. She looks at the stars again. She is still glad they exist. And then there's Adam. Eve's description of Adam is frankly one of the funniest and most tender things ever written. She spends weeks following him around. He runs away. She follows. He climbs trees. She describes him as, quote, a reptile with no hips, shaped like a carrot going downward. And yet, she cannot stop thinking about him. She lies awake. She wonders why. She writes entire pages. Is it his singing? She says, with painful honesty, that his singing makes milk go sour. But she is learning to love sour milk. So why? Why does she love him? She concludes, simply, because he is mine, and because he is a man. That is all. That is enough. And Mark Twain, who wrote this for his wife Olivia, who had just died, knew exactly what he was doing. Now, the serpent. The serpent, who in Twain's telling is actually quite philosophically sophisticated, sits down with Eve and tries to explain concepts like death, morality, and eternal consequences. Eve has never experienced pain, or fear, or time, or consequence. Serpent. What is pain? The serpent asks. Eve. I don't know. Serpent. What is fear? Eve. No idea. Serpent. What is eternity? Eve. What? The serpent, in Twain's version, does not tempt Eve with power or knowledge. He simply cannot explain why she shouldn't eat the apple, because she has no framework for understanding consequences. She is a child. An immortal, glowing, beautiful child who does not yet know that anything can end. She eats the apple, and everything ends. Twain's fall is not dramatic. It's devastating, in the most quiet way. One moment, Eve is golden and laughing. The next, she sees herself, and she is ashamed. Not because of what she did, but because she suddenly understands shame exists. She didn't know it. Adam, dear, clueless. Cataloging Adam watches her transform, watches her age happen in an instant, watches her hair silver and her face change. And he picks up the apple, and he eats it too. Not because he was tempted, not because the serpent convinced him, but because she was there, and he would not let her face whatever was coming alone. That's it. That's the whole love story. Later, in a section called Eve Tells Her Story, their son Abel comes home wounded. Eve tends to him. She sits beside him all night, warming him, watching him. She notices he's cold. She adds blanket. He doesn't warm up. She notices he's very still. She leans in. He doesn't move. She asks, is this the long sleep? Is this what they call death? She doesn't want to say it. She asks it as a question. Will he never wake up? He won't. And for the first time in the entire book, there is no joke, no pun, no sardonic aside. Just a mother, in the dark, holding her child, learning what the word death actually means. Mark Twain wrote this 4 years after his daughter Susie died. Make of that what you will. The book ends with 2 epitaphs. Adam stands over Eve's grave and writes, wheresoever she was, there was Eden. That's it. The man who spent the first 50 pages calling his wife the new creature and trying to classify their son as a fish. That man, at the end, writes the most beautiful sentence in the English language. Wheresoever she was, there was Eden. Mark Twain wrote this book as a love letter to his wife. He finished it after she died. He never really recovered. And somehow, through all the talking animals and the misidentified babies and the terrible singing and the stars that couldn't be knocked out of the sky with a stick, he managed to say something true about what it means to love another person so completely that the world reorganizes itself around them. And when they're gone, the garden closes. So, that was The Diaries of Adam and Eve by Mark Twain, a book that is depending on the page you're on, either the funniest thing you'll ever read or the most quietly devastating. I recommend reading it, preferably with someone you'd follow out of paradise, or at least someone whose singing you could learn to love, even if it makes the milk go sour. The burial mound settled under the rain, turning into a patch of green that blended with the valley. Eve sat on the hillside, a sharpened reed in her hand. She pressed it into a flat stone, carving deep, jagged lines. I love him because he is mine. The words were permanent, a physical tether to the life they had lost. Below, the fire crackled, turning raw grain and hunted meat into a shared meal. They sat close, the heat of the flames washing over them, a ritual that replaced the chaos of the past with the steady rhythm of survival. Years bled into decades. The skin on their hands thinned, mapping the veins like the riverbeds they had crossed. Adam moved slower, his spine curving toward the earth, while Eve's eyes held the same intensity, though clouded by the long light of many sunsets. They returned to the ancient oak, the tree that had stood silent witness to their beginning. They sat beneath its massive, gnarled limbs, their bodies leaning into one another for support. They were no longer the beings who had stepped out of the garden. They were the architects of their own history. The oak remained, but the space beside it was quiet. Adam stood alone, his shadow stretching long across the grass. He reached out, his fingers trembling as they brushed the rough surface of the stone marker. He traced the letters carved into the rock. Wherever she was, there was Eden. The words were simple, yet they held the weight of every sunrise they had shared and every sunset they had endured together. He did not weep. He simply stood, his hand resting on the stone, as if he could still feel the warmth of her presence beneath the soil. He looked out from the hill, his eyes scanning the vast valley below. It was no longer a wild, empty expanse. Smoke rose from hundreds of hearths. Paths crisscrossed the meadows like veins in a leaf. He saw figures moving in the distance, men and women building shelters, tending to crops, and teaching their children how to name the stars. They were poets, builders, and lovers, each one carrying a faint, glowing echo of the original garden within their hearts. Adam turned away from the grave, his steps slow but steady. He walked toward the valley, disappearing into the movement of the people. The story did not end with the stone. It continued in every breath, every word, and every act of creation that followed.